microphone will come on. Welcome everybody to the Police, Fire and Crime panel meeting. The first item on the agenda is the appointment of chairman. Can I have nominations, please?
Yes, could I nominate Bernard Peters as chairman, please?
Is that seconded? Thank you. Is that all right with you, Councillor Peters?
That's fine. Thank you very much for your vote of confidence. Thank you.
Chair, do you want me to explain that we're having some technical issues today? Unfortunately, the system is having some issues and the cameras aren't following the microphones in the same way as they would do normally, so there might be a delay for anybody watching on the webcast.
Right, thank you. Welcome everyone and thank you for attending today. Monday the 21st of June, of course, the Staffordshire Police and Crime panel. Before we get into item 2 on the agenda, I wonder if I could ask colleagues to make sure their mobile phones are off or on silent, not to disrupt the meeting. And if members feel inclined to ask a question, for the benefit of the cameras being able to pick you up fairly quickly, would you mind putting your hand up as soon as you're minded that you have a question to ask? Right, item 2 on the agenda, appointment of vice chairman. Are there any nominations? I'd like to nominate my colleague from, can't see him, there he is. My colleague sits there. So that's been seconded. Thank you. Any others? No? Thank you. Well, welcome. In your new role. Item 3 on the agenda, apologies. Are there any apologies?
There are, Chair. I've received apologies from Anne Edgeler, who has sent Ray Sutherland, the substitute member, Simon Gaskin, Jill Heeson, who has sent Stephen Sweeney as her substitute, and Keith Walker, who's on holiday.
Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda are declarations of interests. If I just may declare that I know Mrs. Fisher from her time as a county councillor. Are there any more declarations of interest? Right, Mr. Jones?
Yes, similarly, I've known Helen Fisher in my time as a county councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, similar to yours, I do know Councillor Mrs Fisher from previous at Lichfield District.
Right, thank you very much indeed. What might be useful, colleagues, is if, because we're all new today and names on occasion are not my strong point, if before you speak, if you could introduce yourself just by letting the colleagues know who you are. Right. Item 5 on the agenda, minutes of the meeting held on the 1st and 15th of February. Are those meeting minutes acceptable? Are there any comments? Any amendments or alterations that have felt needed? I'll take those as accepted then, thank you. Item 6 on the agenda is appointment of a co-optee member. We had a meeting last week to interview several candidates for this position, and we have, we're pleased to be able to appoint a candidate today, or confirm that. Is it Mr.
Yes, Chair. The interview panel was held on the 15th of June, and it's for the panel today to formally ratify that it's Adrian Bowen as co-opted independent member.
Thank you. So can we confirm and ratify Mr. Bowen to that position, please? Are there any objections? That's done then, thank you. May I take this moment, Mr. Bowen will be replacing Mr. Paul Darby, who has spent some considerable time on the police and crime panel. And I'd like Mrs. Patterson to perhaps write to him and thank him for his time and commitment that he's shown towards this panel, and I'm sure we've all benefited from his input over the years. So thank you to Mr. Darby. Item 7 on the agenda, if I could move now to the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner, Mr. Adams, to make his presentation, please. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chairman. Congratulations to you and Richard as Vice Chairman. I look forward to, well, at least 3 years of intense but friendly grilling from you and colleagues. Just by way of introduction, I think a number of you will be aware that my key objective in the next 3 years is to keep Staffordshire safe. And that goes, for me, beyond the visible policing that we all want to see more of, and also encompasses a lot of the work that goes on behind the scenes, and we very much trust the service to deliver for us. And by that I mean things such as the regional relationships we've got with the West Midlands, West Mercia and Warwickshire for serious organised crime and for counter-terrorism. And I think one of the highlights of my first few weeks so far has been the briefings I've received from the region, and the confidence I've got that that intensely serious stuff is being well looked after, and we form a strong partnership there and we play a key role in it. I've been elected on a mandate to deliver more visible policing, and I plan to do that. That will partly be because we're going to have some more officers, and that will be very much a case of working with the government to deliver the promised numbers, but then really balancing what the service needs, particularly in areas like investigation. And you'll have read this week particularly about the need for more digital forensics. This is analysis of phones, analysis of laptops, things like that, particularly when we're looking at crimes against women, crimes of a sexual nature, and the time it can take to interrogate phones. Really crucial evidence in bringing cases and progressing things. Now, you wouldn't ordinarily see those experts, see those officers on the streets. So I'm looking to get a balance between what we need to tackle emerging trends in crime, reflecting the way crime is changing with technology, but also that traditional visibility in high streets, outside schools, in the evenings, in our areas of hospitality, which we're pretty good at here in Staffordshire. And that sense of people being able to go out and enjoy themselves but feel safe. I'm also very keen that we manage our finances very carefully. The more I can do about that, the more we can spend money on the right things, then the more we'll have available to the frontline teams who are essentially working with families, working with people with vulnerabilities, working with the public. So it's a balance of saving money where we can. Now that means sharing assets, means a little more of what you've already seen with my predecessor, making best use of buildings, because it's people that tackle crime, not buildings. And I'll be doing my utmost to manage that. That's where my experience, hopefully, at this authority and in other places, will help me to manage the large budget. And they're pretty big, £250 million across the two services. I think the plan for this meeting going forward, if possible, is very soon I'll be bringing forward my priorities that will form the basis of the revised police plan and the revised local fire plan. And I'm looking forward to you holding me to account on delivering on those priorities. In turn, I'll hold the Chief Constable to account for delivering on everything, but also delivering on, particularly on those priorities that we're stating to the public that we're going to deliver. The process around the plan involves a great deal of consultation. I'll be checking that my ideas match with the public's. There may well be some things they see as important that make their way into that plan. But the good news is there's a real core of practical and performance already in the plan. For me, it's more about that experience of the service perhaps than before. So initial contact through non-emergency lines and 101, whether it's on the phone or digital. A real sense that the service is listening and able to respond, and if you happen to be, unfortunately, a victim of crime, that you get well looked after. And I'm very pleased to say that the work I've seen directly overseen by the Commissioner's Office, particularly around victims of domestic abuse, sexual exploitation, is tremendous. And I'm delighted to see that there's some really committed and very professional people looking after those that have suffered from crime or abuse. So in the future there'll be an opportunity to challenge me. I'll challenge the Chief Constable. I'm sure there will be things that you want to bring to this room that need working through. Give me as much notice of those as I can, and I may occasionally bring senior officers along to assist in the response. But I'm very aware that you're holding me to account. That's the role. And I'll do my utmost to satisfy you on that. We've got some issues, I think, across the county, perhaps best described as locality differences. Dealing with crime in Hanley in the middle of Stoke is different to Wombourne in the southeast of, or southwest. Gosh, you got that wrong, Brian. Southwest of the county. They are very different challenges. And that's really come home to Helen and I in our briefings, particularly with the fire service, where we're going to need a different type of service to suit the areas. We've largely there already, but there's a big push coming from government, new white papers for a modern fire service, and we need the right sort of hybrid mix of whole-time and retained firefighters to tackle the demands of our particular geographies. I'm also aware we need those relationships to be right where we've got borders, and we've got them all around the county, believe it or not, but there's different crime coming across borders. We've even got county lines running operations from as far afield as Edinburgh. So there are challenges where we need to work effectively with neighbours. And I'm very keen that people representing the public are informing me as a commissioner and through to you as a panel about how we're delivering in the interests of each area. So that's rural crime, urban crime, response times wherever you live in the county. These all matter. It's about a good experience wherever you live in Staffordshire. So I'm hoping that'll give you a bit of a flavour for where I'm going. You know, I reckon I'm only half, best of the way in terms of understanding the nature and complexity of the two organisations. We've met a lot of people at the top and middle. Anne and I are determined to meet far more people at the sharp end, and we're enjoying doing that where we have, well, in fact we're enjoying it with everybody, but we're particularly keen to meet up with people at the sharp end and hear their experience. That's the way I've steered and assisted businesses in the past, by asking what happens at the sharp end, and we'll get the same from our professionals. And I can tell you folks, they are committed and capable people who sign up to look after us. So my job is to make sure they've got the tools and the training to do that effectively. Now that probably gives us enough time for a few questions, and I'd really welcome them.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. If I may just come back on a couple of points that you made there. We're in unprecedented times, of course, and the model that you described to us, I would think, would be distorted now and again post-pandemic. Would you see that being any sort of additional challenge? The long COVID, domestic violence, mental health, that I would think will put some pressure on the police force. And just bringing it back to, particularly in my division in East Staffordshire, we have a very multicultural society where English isn't their first language. So I do hope that the police will be geared up to deal with what is in fact a very, 26 different languages spoken in East Staffordshire at the moment. So that in itself could be a challenge as well. Could you summarise anything back to those questions, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think the pandemic, I'm sure that the Chief Constable, Emma Barnett, will say a bit more about this later as well. I think we've got the balance really spot on over the last 12 months. There's been enough enforcement where it's absolutely necessary, but generally the service have looked to educate and inform and assist members of the public, and to some degree help people not to be too anxious when others are misbehaving, but also not to be too heavy-handed. And that's in contrast to some of the areas immediately neighbouring us where I think they went too far. There is some concern already been expressed. We're seeing increases in 999 calls already as a result of releasing the lockdown. Some of that's exuberance, some of it I feel is pent-up need for people to report. It's very interesting looking at domestic violence across the country, because the expected increase has in general not occurred, although there is an increase in Staffordshire. We're hopeful that that is as a result of the very active promotion we've done about reporting domestic violence in Staffordshire. It's been quite visible, and the services are very quick to respond. So I'm not necessarily concerned that we've had a slight increase here. What we may see is on release of lockdown, as people are more able to find their own space, make a phone call, speak to somebody in private, that we may see a blip in reporting of domestic violence. It'd be interesting to talk about that again at the next meeting. It may be the situation is not as bad as we all feared, but an awful lot of government money has gone in to assist those services, and I know that some families and relationships have found it extremely difficult being in an enclosed space with each other and not having that means to escape to some degree. Equally, mental health. I think this is potentially a large issue for us going forward, especially as people reach for health care that they haven't had in the last 12 months for one reason or another, and they feel they need it. I think there's almost a bow wave there, and I'm hopeful. Young people in particular, they're pretty resilient in the main, and I think we can be positive that most of them are going to spring out of this and be ready to grab life again. I do hope so, but some won't. It's been quite tough, particularly for young people. And relearning, I found myself relearning to socialise, come back into an office and have a chat with people face to face. It can be quite daunting when you haven't done it for a few months. It's all right once you get back into it, and I've enjoyed it, and I think we'll all feel the same when we go back to work as well. So that mental health stuff's a big piece. I welcome your point about diverse population. It is very much the case in East Staffordshire, also in Stoke-on-Trent. I think you'll be reassured to know that most of the recruits that we're bringing in under the Uplift programme, that's the part of our 20,000, is reflecting our local population very nicely at the moment. And I think we may even be 50% female. Yeah. So half the recruits are female, which is terrific news. And we're going to be in a place where the service is very reflective of the population, and I hope that will give some areas some more confidence to go forward. And I'm looking forward to getting out and meeting all of those communities myself and hearing their specific issues as well.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Are there any more questions? Mr. Jones.
Thank you. I'm Brian Jones, Deputy Leader of Cannock Chase District Council and Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Safety and Partnerships. Can I firstly congratulate you, Commissioner, on your appointment, and thank you for coming today. Quite rightly in your opening statement you mentioned that you want to keep Staffordshire safe. We'd expect nothing less, but still good to hear. Of course, key to that is working with the districts and boroughs across Staffordshire, and I'm particularly grateful for the locality deal funding that Cannock Chase District Council has received last year and in previous years. That money is vital to supporting the work of the Community Safety Hub. We have an excellent relationship with the police in Cannock, and I'm just looking for an early heads-up, Commissioner. Is that funding likely to continue this year? Have you had an opportunity to consider the funding? Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, and congratulations to you on your new role at Cannock as well. I'm sure you're going to do a fine job. Yeah, the police and fire service can't do what they do on their own. Absolutely no way. It's really important that we have close relationships with partners. I'm hopeful there will be even closer than they have been in the past. I'm very keen that we promote the value of the community safety partnerships locally. I will support them, and I would like them to better reflect the local differences. So what's being delivered in Cannock, what's being delivered in Newcastle, they'll feel different because the places are different and they have a different requirement. And I think your strategic needs assessment and input from local people should mean that some of that funding is spent in a different way on your priorities. And whilst some of those priorities will be across the piece, the whole force area, and I would expect and welcome appropriate use of that in an area, I will also make available funding for that local difference. So I'm not quite clear yet how we're going to do that. I think it will be a little bit different, but if anything, it will raise the profile and the capacity of the Community Safety Partnership to do more. That's my ambition.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Yes.
Councillor Brian Edwards from South Staffordshire. And you know we've had an incident recently down in South Staffs with problems with the response times. And I'm sure with the correspondence we've had recently, to be hopefully looking into those. It was the response times of the major services rather than the local policing unit, but if you could look into that, it would be very helpful.
Thank you, Brian. For me, the number one job of the service is to respond to emergencies. I really value everything else, but the key job is you've got an emergency, something you can't resolve yourself, you're relying on the professionals to be there as quickly as possible. And I am aware that across some parts of the county there are some issues at the moment. It's not quite where everybody would like it to be. I've already spoken to the Chief Constable about it, and I'm looking forward to some feedback as to how that's going to be improving. The particular issue in South Staffs, I'm waiting for some detailed information on. As soon as I've got, in fact, I think we have a chance to meet next week. so I'll feed back to you personally about that. Having said that, Brian, I am aware that the service in South Staff seems to have improved since the station reopened at Codsall, because that was closed for a while, I understand, and the difference was noticeable. So there's almost a lesson there, isn't there, in making sure we've got those local dispatch points. But I think the public have the impression that to some degree their response is based in these key response hubs, the 3 we've got around the county. Now that is not the case. There may be instruction coming out from there and management of an area, but essentially the teams are out in places where they can react quickly to response. Now that might be on the corner of an important road junction or outside a particular town, and the key is making sure that they are located in an appropriate place to move in. Clearly sometimes you've got 2 or 3 incidents going on at the same time. There might be a delay, but I need to fully understand that, because confidence will come from a rapid response. So we'll be able to feed back a little bit more on that, I hope, very soon. By the way, I also understand your new local commander, Wayne, has gone down extremely well in South Staffs, and that's boosting the neighbourhood team, and their prevention, early intervention and attention to things like car theft are also very welcome in South Staffs. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Yes, please.
We've got to look more at the villages as well than just the towns, because I live in a small village, Blythe Bridge, Forsbrook, and the response times there are unacceptable, totally unacceptable. We've lost our PCSOs since the reorganisation of PCSOs under different leaders, shall we say, and we're not happy as a community with the police force. We've got numbers of small offences that we know our PCSOs used to deal with. Just, knock on the front door and say, move it, if that was a car problem. Or if there's a young lad who's causing havoc, go up and see his parents. But we don't get that sort of now. And if we get a big problem, the response times, it's all over and done with by the time you get there. So I've got to say, you've got to start looking at the villages and the towns. Towns are great, they're covered. You seem to have more CCTVs in towns. There's no CCTV in the villages. And if we have something go wrong in a village, by the time you get there, it's either over and done with or somebody's been really hurt. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Is there a
Tony.
supplementary, Mr.
Sorry?
Jones? A supplementary.
Yes, one more question, Commissioner, please. At a previous meeting with the previous Commissioner and the Chief Constable, I raised the issue, although it's low level, it does cause residents a lot of angst and certainly fills my house back up, and that's inconsiderate parking. Now, I'm sure you'll be aware that the previous Chief removed I think it was the previous Chief anyway, the right of PCSOs to issue fixed penalty tickets. And obviously we can only enforce using the Clear Streets team to get them there, but often that's later and it causes difficulties. So notwithstanding that operational matters are for the Chief Constable rather than yourself, could I just encourage you to discuss that with the future Chief Constable with a view to looking at whether PCSOs could be reinstated with the authority, where appropriate, to give fixed penalty tickets. It's a problem throughout the county. When I was a county councillor, other county councillors would also raise that with me. I see time and time at meetings all the while. So whilst it's low level and certainly shouldn't be your greatest priority, particularly parking outside schools can be a nightmare, as I'm sure you're aware. Thank you.
Mr. Adams, I thought maybe Mr. Jones was going to build on what was said there, but
PCSOs have had no authority to do that at all. They could write a note on a windscreen and stick it on, move it. And that's what I asked the last commissioner. Could we give more power to PCSOs just for those type of incidents? And I feel as if they got the power and they were patrolling the streets and round the villages and round the towns, we wouldn't have a lot of these issues. But they have no power of arrest, they have no power to issue a ticket. It's just a case of they go and they've got a nice attitude and a nice tone of voice with the people, which only changes when they really get some aggro back. I will say that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Adams, a very focused series of questions there, perhaps, to do with visibility and roles and responsibilities. Would you be able to come back on that?
Yes. Firstly, on the villages thing, I'm interested in every locality, Tony. If it's not working anywhere, I want to know about it. I've already had 2 or 3 members of the public contact me directly about areas immediate to where you've talked about, as well as the county councillor. So that's already part of a conversation. And I think similarly to South Staffs, I'll come back to you when I have a little more information about the response in that area. PCSO numbers haven't dropped around the county. Is my understanding in the last 10 years they're about the same, so it's interesting if they're being deployed differently. I'm not sure if that's about just a local shortage or whatever. And got to be careful, I think, not to do a disservice to PCSOs. Some of them join up they don't join up to be police officers. They join up to be neighbourhood and community professionals, and their job is to be attractive to somebody who wants to pass on intelligence. They play a key role in preventing and intervening early with people who are getting themselves into trouble, and that stops things escalating. The ones that do that well are a terrific resource to us. I'm very keen that they aren't diverted into roles that others could do, and there's a concern about the parking ticket thing on that basis. I know it's a mixed picture across the country. I've already raised that informally with the Chief Constable, and we're going to have a chat about the range of powers that are available. For example, there was some confusion about whether they could perform a stop and search. Actually, they can perform a stop and search on alcohol and cigarettes, but they don't have the power to hold. So they are then requiring somebody using skill to hold whilst a warranted officer comes to their assistant. But generally they're working in a team, they press the button, they make the alert, and somebody is there to work with them quite quickly. I do appreciate that isn't always the case, and having been a county councillor, I know a good chunk of our problems are outside schools. Now, my view is it isn't just inconsiderate parking. Sometimes it's downright dangerous, and sometimes it is illegal. And part of a presence outside schools, I think, could alleviate some of that without the need to issue tickets. I think we can cleverly manage that. But that's a conversation to have, because these are matters for the Chief and her team to determine. So a wider range for PCSOs, the localities, and potentially a stretch on what they do, but I'm not ready to commit to that.
Thank you. Any more questions? Please. Okay.
Hi, congratulations, Ben, on your appointment. Just listening to what my fellow colleagues have said around the chamber, I totally concur with the issues raised that we see up in Stoke. The area that my colleague from Leek raised about the villages is a little bit, I feel, the same in Stoke, where we've got the town centres, obviously the 6 town centres, and then we've got the surrounding areas which are in the same ilk as a village. So going to the lines of are the PCSOs being deployed differently, I would say definitely yes. I know that in my 2 years as a councillor, I've gone from 2 full-time and a part-time PCSO on my ward alone down to 1 part-time PCSO, and that's made a massive impact. I never ever see a PCSO on the beat on foot on my ward anymore. I do, however, work in one of the towns. I work in Tunstall, and I do see regularly 2 PCSOs walking around the town, which I would expect because there's been a lot of issues there. But that doesn't help my residents on my ward, like the likes of Badley Green, Milton and Norton. I know they've lost their PCSOs, their numbers are down. And I just feel that we need, I've seen a massive increase in petty theft on my ward in the last 12 months, and I relate entirely to being no visual policing whatsoever. So I'd really like to see those PCSOs back on the beat, back on wards, back in the rural areas, back in the villages, back in the suburbs, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any more questions? Mr. Adams.
Sorry, Chairman, just to come back. Glyn, the Chief Executive, has just informed me the PCSO numbers over the last 8 years are down about 10%, so we've gone from about 220 to 200. So there's a small difference there. I think the more interesting challenge for us is to make sure they're deployed where the action is, and we would want that. We'd want them in the areas of greatest need, but that needs to be constantly under review. So if we have an emerging situation in Blythe Bridge or in Milton, then that's where we need to be responding. So there's something in that for me about how we question the flexibility of the deployment. And then where possible, they get engaged with the community so they can add value and learn to know who everybody is. So hopefully we'll get in the right direction with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. Richard Cox, Lichfield District Council. And congratulations again, Ben. One of the things that I've come across, and I don't know whether it will come under your remit, but one of the criticisms, I think, is the 101 system in terms of how it operates and how it questions. And obviously, one understands you have to categorise the importance of that phone call, but to every individual, that phone call is important because they are obviously having to make that call to have some form of assistance, recognising that it's not a 999 emergency call. And it might often relate to the antisocial behaviour issues and so forth. Is that something that you're probably aware of and obviously can have some influence in creating a system that's probably more customer friendly?
Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Chairman. Absolutely, Richard. It will be one of my priorities. Not just, that won't be headed 101, it will be headed contact. So the ability of any member of the public to speak to the service, to share intelligence, to get feedback on stuff they've reported before, to do that quickly and effectively, to do it in the middle of the night on a website if they want to, or by phone if they feel they need to, and to get a good service. I think that's all possible, and I think it's a fundamental part of making people think that their experience with the service is good, and that will give them confidence that everything else is being dealt with properly. So yes, it is absolutely one of my priorities, and it has to be because I've heard it too much from the public over the last year that it's not where it needs to be.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for Mr. Adams? Right, thank you. We'll move to item 8 on the agenda, questions to the Police Fire Commissioner from members of the public. Andy, is there anything you can add to that?
Thank you, Chair. We have had 2 questions from members of the public, Mr Dodd and Mr Curry. The questions are in the report, and the Commissioner has provided a written response which is attached to the report. Both parties have been invited to the meeting but were unable to attend. So following the meeting I will send them a copy of the report and the minutes for their information. I'm not sure if there are any questions from the panel.
Is there anything to build around what Mrs. Patterson's just shared with us? Any comments? Right. Okay, if you do that then, please. Sorry, Mr. Jones.
Yeah, I'd just like to say to the Commissioner that the answers were very balanced, particularly in relation to the number of complaints and type of complaints. And I was pleased to see that comparing us with our neighbours, the complaints were actually lower than the average, and I think that was a very positive thing to see.
Yes. I think benchmarking information, if that's the phrase, is always helpful in situations like this. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Chairman, just before you move on, one or two of the members outside the meeting have asked for further training on the complaints process, both for police complaints and fire and rescue complaints. Is that something that the panel want me to try and arrange?
I think there was a consensus informally that we would welcome that opportunity. Not wishing to bias it one way or the other, but the fire service firefighters never seem to figure as much in the agendas, really. But we'd like to get familiarity with all of the way that process operates, if that's okay. Thank you. Is there anything else? Item 9 on the agenda, decisions published by the Commissioner, firefighter pensions and the Princess Trust peer meeting. Is there anything to say on those items? Are we expecting anything?
No, Chair, just for those new members to the panel, at every meeting we have, there's an opportunity for you to look at the decisions that the Commissioner has taken since the last meeting. We just put a link onto the agenda. It gives you the information if you follow it electronically, and this is just your opportunity to ask any questions if you want to.
Right. Okay, well, we've noted that, and thank you for that. I assume there are no questions then based on that point. Thank you. We could now go to item 10 on the agenda, the Home Office grant for 2021.
Thank you, Chair. This is an annual report which the panel considers. It gives you information on how the panel has spent the Home Office grant, which was allocated for 2021. We haven't received the allocation for this year yet, but we're expecting the same as previous years. Any questions, Chair?
Are there any questions? Thank you for that. Yes. I don't know the answer to that.
Sorry, Chair. Did you say community fund,
Yes.
Councillor Home? Oh no, this is the Home Office grant that is allocated to the panel, just for you to hold meetings to get officer support and legal advice when needed.
Yes. Item 11 on the agenda then, the annual report on the handling of complaints against the Commissioner.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Again, this is an annual report. It provides the panel with information on the number of complaints referred to the panel which relate to the personal conduct of the Commissioner and or his deputy. As you can see, in the last 12 months there have been a total of 8 complaints made by 5 individuals. These have been dealt with by the monitoring officer, John Tradewell, who acts on your behalf, and he has delegated authority to do that. There have been none related to the conduct of the Commissioner, and 3 have been referred to the IOPC as they contained allegations of criminal actions. We haven't had any response from them, actually.
Right.
It's for noting, unless you want to ask any questions.
Are there any comments or observations on that point, or I propose that we just note the report that's been given to us today. Right, thank you. Item 12 on the agenda is questions to the Commissioner by panel members. If I may just open this particular item and just ask for a view as to the way ahead. I think there was you alluded to something, Mr. Adams, in your opening statements about people feel safe on the streets. CCTV, does that figure in any of your forward plans? And secondly, in terms of safety of the community, Safer Neighbourhood Panel, I think you've met with the chair of various Safer Neighbourhood Panels recently. I just wondered perhaps briefly if you could outline your thoughts at the moment on those points and perhaps an indication as to the way ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. CCTV is, I think, particularly interesting. It does, as you say, and it came up earlier, it offers people some confidence when they're out and about in busy places. I think there's a difference between monitored CCTV and a lot of the new technology, which we're seeing. An awful lot of people on their front door have now got a camera doorbell, and that offers them some security in terms of looking back at who was at the front door or messing about on their driveway. And similarly, a lot of businesses are fitting similar very low-cost digital cameras. And we've also got dash cams in cars, which can be really extremely helpful in collecting evidence. I'm doing a bit of work myself on getting up to speed as to how the service can make best use of that, and where possible reassure people that that can be used as evidence in the case that something has occurred, and we want to go back and try and capture some of that detail. The responsibility of the police, or well, not so much the responsibility, but the police are very happy to use CCTV footage and be alerted to incidents as they take place from monitoring stations. Predominantly that is delivered and funded by the local authorities. To some degree, I think, but only a small degree, the Commissioner's Office has supported one or two CCTV implementations over the last 8 years. So it's primarily a case of working with the local councils to make sure that that's in the right places, that there's a good programme of renewal in place so that we don't have technology that suddenly disappears and there isn't a plan to replace it. And I'm sure the service would assist in those conversations. I think there's value in sharing where the costs are, which is in the back office monitoring generally. I think maybe Tamworth Lichfield share monitoring, which has helped, and that means there's a few more cameras out there than there were when they each had their own monitoring unit. So that's a way forward. And interestingly, we've had 2 successes in the city with what's called safer streets bids in the last 18 months, and they're quite traditional bids for funding around fencing, lighting dark areas, and also including CCTV. Recently secured £400,000 from government for Hanley. Now some of that will be mobile CCTV. Now that's great news because the bad guys don't necessarily know where it is. It gets moved around. It isn't that traditional, very expensive camera-based technology stuck on lampposts. It can be quite discreet and moved around an urban area to suit the hot spots. So I don't think we'll see the back of CCTV. I think it's going to become more and more widespread, almost on the basis that everybody is carrying some sort of camera. And certainly Stop and Search and our response teams, they personally carry body cams. That's almost, again, a form of digital recording. It's there to protect them as well as the people that they are arresting or approaching, because you've got evidence there that you can look at when there are concerns. So, if I may, I'd like to know a little more, and then perhaps we could cover this again in the future. But the key message is it's one of those areas where we need to work with the councils and make sure that where it's important for a high street, that there's a plan in place around constantly renewing it. Primarily because the new stuff is generally cheaper, and get onto new technology as fast as we can. The SNPs, for those that might not know, the Safer Neighbourhood panels, these were set up by Matthew, my predecessor, getting on for 7 or 8 years ago. His intention was, I think, entirely correct, that we need local influence of local policing. I'm having a very, very good look at this because I want to maintain that local input, actually not just around neighbourhood policing, but on a wider remit. I would like the local input around response, as we've heard this morning, around road policing, around speeding, and to some degree around the partnership delivery work as well, antisocial behaviour, safeguarding and other areas, because they're all parts of keeping a neighbourhood safe. And I'm trying to figure out how we best make that work, possibly with an improved partnership with the community safety partnerships. But this is a bit of work in progress, and I will speak to some people in the room about this in the next few weeks, with a view to maintaining that local difference. I don't necessarily want groups that become well versed in what the police are doing in the area. I want the police to be listening to what concerns local people, and to feed that back up to my office and me as part of challenging the Chief Constable. So I really like the model, perhaps slightly differently from now, but I would like to keep the local influence. Interestingly, Chairman, I don't believe any of the PCC area does this. They have local input through maybe a single committee and an independent advisory group. And to my mind, that doesn't give us that locality touch, which I feel is important in Staffordshire.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Very insightful, and I'm sure the committee are very grateful for your honesty and transparency around those two particular points. Thank you. Are there any more questions? Yes, certainly.
Would there be any chance of part funding SIDS, speed indicating devices? As through the village, lorries are coming through, nice big ones. And there's a couple of bad bends actually in the village centre itself where they are actually taking the other side of the road. The local pub has had one of its hanging baskets taken off the wall of its pub, so you can imagine how close the lorries have come. Speed indication may give us a chance. We're putting up gates as they do in the entrance to the village to try and slow them down. But there's a lot of problems with larger lorries in Dillon, where they should go the other way rather than go through the village. But again, cash restrictions, it's quicker to go that way and it uses less fuel. We're going this way. I won't mention the company because it's wrong to do so.
Just before Mr. Adams comes back on that, I think there's something about sat-navs as well.
Yes,
if they send you the quickest route, of course, and
it's called a gentleman's agreement. You don't come this way.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, they're not gentlemen these days.
Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of observations on what's just been said. The SID devices are excellent. I'd put two in my patch, and that was jointly funded between the parish council and also the Safer Roads team. So that worked well. I'm not sure that it's necessarily from yourself, Commissioner. Just going back to the Safer Neighbourhood panels, I was a panellist about 4 or 5 years ago, and I think the intention behind it is fantastic. But I think things have changed a bit, but certainly when I went there was zero training, and some of the people on the panel, I'm not quite sure why they were on there. That may just be an individual thing, but it was quite difficult to get things done. I think it's moved on now, and I think some of the ideas that you've articulated I'd really welcome, because it should be good that the local community are feeding that back to you, whereas certainly when I was on there it was more about accountability of the police for stop and search. We were looking at spit hoods and things like that, rather than actually feeding any community concerns back. So I actually welcome that, Commissioner.
Mr. Adams.
Thanks, Chairman. Just to pick up on the SNP thing first, that scrutiny work is really important, that we get independent people doing that. That's looking at stop and search, use of violence, looking at those body cams I mentioned, and it offers the public some reassurance. I think some of the people are quite talented at that, but I'm probably going to take that out of the SNP remit and invite some of those who enjoy that work to come into that area. I'd also like a more diverse mix of people doing that scrutiny work. I think we might attract more if it's outside of the SNP. So not to lose it, but slightly different. The SIDS, the speed information devices, they do make people stop and think about just how quick they're going. And I mean, it's the same for all of us. We're all in this room. We all live in an area. We all know our own village and roads. These are common across the whole piece and not just in villages. So for me, this is part of the work I intend to do around the Safer Roads Partnership. I need a proper look at this. I don't fully understand how it works. I know we've got safe roads, which is great news. Our fatality and accident rates are very low, and we want to keep it like that. But I also know that speeding was one of the highest concerns of the public when I spoke to them. And, you know, occasionally it's disastrous. You know, more people will die as a result of a car accident or collision than are murdered and serious violence in that respect. So it demands our attention and always will. We'll come back to you on that because it's a priority for us.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Are there any more questions at all? Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Ray Sutherland, Stafford Borough Council. Commissioner, again, congratulations on your appointment, and we look forward to meeting your deputy later on. I think we're all delighted to hear that one of your pledges is to increase the number of police on the street. I think it's easily said, but more difficult to do, specifically in the rural areas like the one that I'm in my ward. I think I've got 11 villages in my ward, and they're all very small villages here and there, and they would all like to see a presence now and again of police through the village. But as I say, it's more difficult to do than it is to say. And I can understand why, because of resources and all the rest of it. Likewise, the situation that's already been brought up about heavy vehicles going through some of our lanes that were never built to take heavy lorries. Some of them were no more than narrow cart lanes, really, and we have that problem, and villagers, the residents, are always concerned about how they affect these small lanes, how they damage the verges and so on and so forth. The reality is that is not, it's more of a situation for parish councils to liaise with the local councillors, whether it's borough or county, to see what we can do through our planning system rather than through the police. But it's this police presence in and around the villages that would actually help give strength to the comments that are made by the parish councillors to the borough and county. So I think, you know, the good thing is that you made it one of your pledges, and I'm pleased to see that, and I'm sure that the people in the villages will also be looking forward to seeing that. Along the same subject of police, do you envisage an increase in the number of police cadets that you recruit? And if so, how? And I have got another question which I'm going to bring out now, which maybe you can consider, and that is that there was discussion about a firing range. Was it a new firing range or an improvement in the firing range? But I understand that there is considerable amount of money needed to invest in this. Considerable meaning millions of pounds. And have you considered whether in fact this will go ahead after considering the costs involved? That's it, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Adams. Can you reply to that?
Yep, thank you. Yes, visibility is really important. It isn't always traditional beat walking. It can be appropriate location of vehicles, drop-off spaces, meeting spaces, police posts, things like that, and regular opportunities for people to meet and around busy areas. So I'm really hoping we're going to see some imaginative solutions for that. It's funny, isn't it? If you don't see a doctor, you're absolutely delighted because that means everything's okay. Somehow, if you don't see a cop, it's not the same. In it is in a way. I mean, if I lived in a village and never saw the police, I would think, that's great. That's what I want. But equally, there's this sense that there is a strong element of that dissuading criminal activity and keeping people aware to the fact that they are being not monitored, but somebody is there to look out for them. So I do really understand that need for a visible presence. The cadet service has been a real success, you know. Matthew and Sue almost single-handedly reignited police cadets around the country. It was not favoured by forces. Matthew and Sue set up a charity to start that off. They've nurtured it, and we have a good, thriving scheme for cadets. This is not a recruitment route for policing. Some of them fall in love with it, and yes, they're going to be police officers, but really it's an opportunity for young people to engage in very positive activities, and particularly for some young people to have an opportunity to meet others and perhaps be steered away from poor activity. And I'm particularly interested in that side of things. Helen and I are really very keen that the cadet service continues. It may be in a slightly different guise. I'm not so sure it needs the Commissioner's oversight anymore, quite frankly. I think the job of establishing cadets is done, and I now know the whole of the country and the police college welcome it and support it in other forces. So that bit of the job might have been done, but let's make sure it continues. And in terms of contributing to funding, I think we'd like to continue to do that. The range is a really big question, and I will, if you don't mind, can we come back to that perhaps at the next meeting, Chairman? I've got a business case coming to me about it. You could say, well, there's an operational requirement. Yes, there is. We do need a better range. The range facilities at the moment are outside, they're at a distance, they aren't suitable for the future. We need our armed officers ready to respond. However, we've then got value for money implications, and we've got future-proofing the service. And I'm very keen that that is presented perhaps as part of a wider conversation about how we use buildings, assets, and how we use our capital. Rest assured, we're going to spend an appropriate amount of money on something like that, not more than is necessary. Yeah. Having some interesting chats about that at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sutherland. I think we'll take you up on that offer, Mr. Adams, and we'll put it on the agenda next time and look forward to hearing a bit more in depth as to the way forward. Thank you. Are there any more questions? Right, item 12, 13 on the agenda. Sorry, 13 on the agenda. Dates for future meetings and the work programme.
Again, Chair, this is a regular report. It's on every panel meeting, and it's your opportunity to raise items. certain items have been discussed, like the range, firing range, and I'll work with the chairman and the commissioner to programme those into appropriate meetings.
Yes, I think I mentioned earlier about exploring CCTV options, and the commissioner came back with an insightful comment, so I would like to think that will be on there. Are there any more topics that people would like to share this afternoon at this point? Mr. Adams?
Chairman, apologies. I wonder if before we moved on to the next item, we might just have a quick break. Would that
Well,
be possible?
I don't know whether we've finished the item we're talking about at the moment, but I was going to propose we have that break, but just let's conclude item 13. Anything else at item 13? No? Well, just to steal the Commissioner's thunder, I was going to propose now that we have a comfort break, if that's acceptable to everyone. We just stretch our legs, and shall we say 10 minutes, is that acceptable?
More than enough, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, 10 minutes then, colleagues, if we could be back at, let's say 3:15. 3:15. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Right, welcome back everyone. We now move to item 14 on the agenda, consideration of the appointment of a Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner in the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Chairman. This role is absolutely huge. I don't think it is in any way appropriate for a commissioner to try and do it on their own, and I don't have all the skills and experience to do it as well as I might with a good deputy. So I was very pleased to have some very positive conversations with Helen Fisher some time ago, actually. As you know, the election was delayed for a year, and my ambition was that I had somebody working alongside me who shared my ambition to keep the place safe, could speak to the public, could work in partnership and understood the public sector, and had experience of really key things for me, like understanding numbers, understanding what's important, and being able to persuade people to make change. So I was absolutely delighted when Helen agreed to be my deputy. I hope you will find her, as I'm sure you will, as capable and pleasant to work with as I do. I absolutely recommend her, but I don't need to speak for her. She will speak for herself.
Thank you. Would you like to address the committee?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to you, and good afternoon, panel. I never thought I'd actually be back in this chamber. I've had some very sticky moments in this chamber, both good and bad, over my years on the county council. I haven't always been in public service, so I'll give a little bit of my background before councils. Started my working life as a professional musician, and then in the 90s with my first husband set up a car repairs business that is still going strong in Cannock. So I've got a fairly robust background in business, or I'd definitely like to think. I'm not part of that business anymore. I have a 25-year-old daughter, and I am now married to a Stokey. I have family in Stoke-on-Trent as well, and I did actually forget, I used to work in Stoke-on-Trent with, when I was a musician. My council life started in 2007 and lasted until 2019. I was elected onto Burntwood Town Council and Lichfield District Council. Burntwood Town Council, I was deputy leader a couple of times, and I was leader for the year before I became a county councillor. Thoroughly enjoyed that. Local politics is what it is all about. Knowing your local area, and I did represent the area that I grew up in, as a lot of us feel very passionate about the area that you grew up in and live in. On Lichfield District Council, I held 2 cabinet roles, to remember. One was community, and I had that for 2 years, and then I had tourism and communications also for 2 years. I did something completely different, and that was chair the planning committee for 4 years, and boy did I learn a lot about people, local neighbourhoods, what makes people passionate about coming to a council meeting. I thoroughly enjoyed that, although at the time I don't think I actually did, but I look back on it now and I learned an awful lot. And then 2017, I was very lucky to be elected onto Staffordshire County Council, again for Burntwood South, and I became Cabinet Support Member for Highways at the first group meeting, which was a complete surprise to me, and I think a few of my colleagues as well. A year later, I actually became the Cabinet Member for that, and I did that until last July. Again, I learned a lot about what makes people tick, what is important to people, and I also learned an awful lot about myself and my abilities. And I always think whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and having the highways portfolio, at times, it definitely felt like that. I'm very humbled and proud in equal measures to have been asked to do this job. It isn't something that I aspired to, so it came as a bit of a surprise when the Commissioner asked me whether I would think about doing this job. I think I'll actually be good at it. I think I will help make a difference with the Commissioner's priorities. We've got some fantastic officers in the office, and I'm really looking forward to getting stuck in. I want to meet the organisations that we fund, and like the Commissioner, I want to meet everybody involved in the police and the fire service. I think it's only when you start to talk to those members of the forces that you really learn what's going on. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's a steep learning curve at the moment. We've got a 100-day plan, of which we will hopefully have learned everything that we need to, and this is the start of week 6. So we are only a little bit into it, so we scratched the surface. But I'm happy to take any questions that anybody wants.
Thank you for that. Excuse me, thank you for that. A very comprehensive account of the story so far, as it were. If I may just start off with a question, I was going to ask you how will you support the Commissioner, but I think you've given us some detail there as to how you intend to go about it. But what would you say, though, mixed up in all you said? I was just trying to ping what you were saying about what your strengths may be. I would perceive you're an extremely good listener, but what are your strengths that you would bring to supporting the Commissioner? And perhaps if we could just draw a line in the sand here and say, in 12 months' time, what do you think success would look like to you, not the Commissioner, to you, And have you got any perception of any of the risks that may be around the journey that you're about to set off on?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. My strengths, I think I'm a good communicator. I think I'm a good listener. I suppose you'd have to ask the people that I've had the good fortune to work with so far in my council career. I like to think that I always put myself in a position of the man or the woman on the street. I think as councillors we work very hard, but we're also very privileged to be in a position to make a difference. And we always have to think, sense check, what would my neighbour say if he was sat at this table now? What would he want to know? So I do like to think it's not just about me. It's about everybody that lives now. For me, in Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent. Wow, 12 months' time. If I've still got a job, that'll be success. So as long as I do a decent job for the Commissioner, that's a tick in the box.
We've got to be appointed today.
Yes, I was sorry. Yes, I was being slightly presumptuous. I do apologise. I would like to see the Commissioner, the work that the Commissioner's office does, and the role of the Commissioner. I would like more people to understand what we do. We commission millions of pounds worth of services to the people of Staffordshire. And for a lot of those people, until they're in trouble, either through their fault or not their fault, it's only then that you need those services. So for a lot of people, the majority of people, they probably don't realise that it's not just about holding the police force to account. It's a whole other thing. And so at the moment, we're just learning about these wonderful organisations, and I can't wait to get out and meet everybody, because they're life-changing organisations. You go to some of these organisations, it's absolutely your lowest point. So in 12 months' time, I would like to think that if somebody said, well, what does that Staffordshire Commissioner do, then they will have a little bit better understanding of what they do and the services that it provides. I think finances are going to be a bit of a challenge to absolutely everybody, councils and us alike. So making sure that we have savings wherever we can. We must protect the people that we want to help. So yeah, I think probably finances.
Okay, well, thank you for that. That's really helpful. Are there any more questions?
I can hear you. Okay. I suppose if we ever have a position such as I've had over the years, we must think strategically. I don't sort of, think, right, I now need to think strategically. I think one of the things that I was mostly proud of when I had the highways portfolio was I really pushed for local members to be given more funding from their normal amount every year to more than twice, nearly 3 times actually it was, so that they could bring about the change that they wanted locally. It's okay for officers to be saying, well, that isn't important, that isn't important. What is important is what the local people think, and a good county councillor will always know exactly what is going on their patch. And for me, that was a great thing to be able to give to each local member, so that they, I suppose, they also had to think quite strategically as well, because there would have been a lot of pull on that amount of money. Does that answer your question? Thank you very much.
Are there any more questions, please? Yes. Please.
Short answer, yes, there will be. The longer answer is the Commissioner can't do this job on his own, as he's already said, so I will be leading on certain things. But at the moment, as you can imagine, we're chopping and changing what we're learning about every day. Every day is completely different. So I think until we're a little bit further in, I won't actually know what I will be leading on, but I will be leading on a few things, I'm sure, but at the moment I don't know.
Thank you. Stephen.
Good day, Helen. The previous Police and Crime Commissioner was very much the face of the Police and Crime Commissioner's office, if you like. I met his deputy once, all the years I've been on this council. Would you envisage your role being more public-facing than supporting Ben in a public way, as opposed to being behind the scenes work, which I'm sure the lady did a lot of work behind the scenes, but I have actually met her once, all the time. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I would like to be a deputy in all sense of the word, even though I'm only going to be working for 3 days a week, so that'll be a challenge to get all this work in. I will be leading on certain things, but I think it's important for me to be able to see what goes on in the whole of the Commissioner's world. If the Commissioner wants me to be more public, that is absolutely fine. I can do that. We have a big patch, Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent, and I think for us to split up and go and do things, I think is the sensible way. If we just go round together, then it's going to take us twice as long to get round everybody. So I'd like to think that I could work independently of the Commissioner. I'm sure, I'm not looking at him, but I'm sure that would be all right.
Thank you. Any further questions? No? Right. Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. I just need to take some advice on whether we deliberate now or we do it a little later.
It's up to the panel. I think originally it was envisaged that you would do both of the hearings, then you would adjourn for 10 minutes to make your decision, and then come back and announce your decision in a public way. Is Emma here?
Okay, well, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you very much, Mrs. Fisher, for your presentation. Right, we'll move on to item 15 now, consideration of the proposed appointment to the post of Interim Chief Constable of Staffordshire. Good afternoon, and welcome to the panel meeting. Consideration of the proposed appointment to the position of Interim Chief Constable. Would you like to make your presentation to us when you're ready, please? Excuse me just a moment. Would you mind just putting your microphone on?
Technical issue.
Thank you.
Okay, right. So, good afternoon. I'm Emma Barnett. I thought what I'd do is just outline in a little more detail my experience that has been included in the paper that I'm sure you've all seen, just so that I can set out for you what I've been doing in my 27.5 years career in policing and how I feel I am a suitable candidate to be the temporary Chief Constable of Staffordshire Police. So I started policing with West Midlands Police out of university and spent 22.5 years with West Midlands Police in a variety of roles, but predominantly in uniform in terms of local policing. I have also been a detective, senior investigating officer, tactical firearms commander, public order commander, so on and so forth, and also led some of the change programs that were in West Midlands Police in 2009-2010, which saw changes to the operating model, but also driving out a high level of savings. But my heart, I guess, is always in neighbourhood policing, and my last two postings were as Chief Superintendent. I was the local policing commander for two areas, one South Birmingham for 2 years, and then my final posting was as the commander at one of the largest command units in the country, which is Birmingham West and Central, so Birmingham City Centre and also West Birmingham, Handsworth, Lozells, Aston and other areas. And the reason I outline that is that I took great pride in delivering a service that met the needs of the local community. It was the area that I actually grew up in, and I felt a real sense of responsibility and belonging to that community. And I actually led for the force on how we delivered neighbourhood policing and what good neighbourhood policing looks like. Worked very closely with partners across the city and the area and also the local community. I then moved on in terms of the Police National Assessment Centre, which I passed in 2015, attended the Strategic Command course in 2016, which then made me eligible for a Chief Officer position. And it was to Staffordshire Police that I successfully applied for the position of Assistant Chief Constable, and I joined the force in August 2016. I can honestly say I've never looked back. It was a great decision on my part. The force is an amazing organisation. I was very welcome from day one. And interestingly, given my huge interest in neighbourhood policing, it was the investigations, the crime, the intelligence, the criminal justice portfolio that I had when I joined. But what that's given me is a real understanding of the importance of how we investigate crime, how we address the serious and organised crime threats, the counter-terrorism portfolio, how we use intelligence to really deliver a good quality of policing. And that portfolio stayed with me until I became the deputy. And in addition, I took on operations a couple of years ago. And again, my real role in that was to ensure that Staffordshire Police had the right resourcing, the right specialist resourcing to meet the threats and to deliver the policing that we wanted to deliver, and also ensure that we were contributing to both the regional effort and also the national strategic policing requirement that we have to do. So some of the main achievements during that period was to redefine our working relationship with the region, particularly with the Regional Organised Crime Unit, to ensure Staffordshire Police and the communities of Staffordshire received the service that was necessary to address the threats here, but also that we were collaborating to make sure we were addressing those threats on a regional basis and also a national basis. I also oversaw some of our improvements around the quality of the investigations that we delivered and how we address serious and organised crime. And that was recognised with the most recent HMIC FRS inspection, which saw us move from requires improvement to good. So I've had 2 periods of being the deputy. I was temporary Deputy Chief Constable at the start of last year when Gareth Morgan, the then Chief Constable, went to the College of Policing on secondment. And then I became the Deputy Chief Constable following a process last summer and took up the role in August last year. I think I would characterise the last 18 months, though, and my leadership within Staffordshire Police, as I think my colleagues would talk about, it has absolutely been defined by the policing through COVID-19 and the pandemic. Over the course of my 5 years in Staffordshire Police, I've led a number of critical incidents and our response to issues that may impact the confidence our communities have in Staffordshire Police. And that includes everything from when we've had a significant IT failure over a weekend and potential impact that may bring through to how we have led some of the major criminal investigations that we've had. And also our response 4 years ago when, after the Manchester Arena terrorist attacks, when obviously we had armed officers on the street, Operation Tempera was enacted, and also there was a real need to provide reassurance to the public. But I don't think anything prepared me for taking command of the force's response to the pandemic at its outset last March. And I led that for the first 4 or 5 months. One of the big things was working through with partners the whole approach across the county. But on a personal and a professional level, probably one of the most challenging periods of policing and of my career, to ensure that we maintained our legitimacy in our communities when faced with the absolute necessity to enforce restrictions that I don't think any of us have ever really thought or considered how we would go about doing that, as well as managing a workforce and individuals full of uncertainty, full of concern around our ability to be able to maintain the service that we want to deliver. So I think I can demonstrate my time here very much around putting our communities at the heart of what we do. Very much interested in how we deliver increasingly better performance in terms of the service that we deliver, and also making sure that I've got the right workforce with the right skills in the right place at the right time with the right focus to deliver a really good policing service for the people of Staffordshire. I've moved up to Staffordshire. I used to live in Worcestershire, and it was a bit of a tortuous commute, but now I feel very much that this is my home. And I am absolutely wedded to the notion around public service. It's what drives me, and a real desire to make sure that we are delivering and continuing to deliver a really good service to our communities. My aim over the next couple of months, recognising that this is absolutely a temporary arrangement, is not to make sweeping change. I don't think that's within my gift, but it is to offer some stability, some continuity. I do believe in the direction of travel for the force that the previous Chief Constable set. I was clearly part of that decision-making process as well. And I'm very clear to bring around a degree of stability as we go through the summer. We are in still uncertain times as we come out of COVID, understanding very much what the new normality is going to be and what that means for policing, our resourcing, how we address the policing requirements of our community. Working with partners to make sure that we are absolutely on the same page in terms of what we want for our communities. And clearly working with the new Commissioner to understand a new police and crime plan in the autumn. We know we've got some challenges ahead. We know we will have, and we're already seeing, rises again in our calls for service and our demands as we come out of COVID. The better weather is upon us, things like the Euros, and we're working very hard to plan to the nth degree our levels of resourcing over the summer as we work through that period. And we also know, looking further ahead, we have to make savings, identify where we wish to make some savings. We know we have some real investments in IT in the autumn. We want to make sure we're absolutely getting the best from those in terms of how potentially that will transform our service delivery as well. And we continue on our journey around delivering those outcomes for the public, around confidence, satisfaction, criminal justice outcomes, and also keeping crime and harm low. So that's a sort of a history of me, and also my sort of intentions for the next couple of months. The only other thing I would just add is that it is a real privilege that I hold the post of for the National Police Chiefs Council around victims and witnesses. So this is a national portfolio that I work very closely with key stakeholders at government level, and also key stakeholders such as the Victims Commissioner, the Domestic Abuse Commissioner. And I work right across the 43 forces to ensure that we are delivering the best service to victims and witnesses. I've written the national strategy, I've contributed to the cross-government strategy on victims and witnesses, and I'm now working closely with regional chief officer leads to ensure that the Victims Code of Practice is being implemented and is effective across policing. So that's just another experience that I would share with you all, which I hope gives you some assurance around my suitability to be the temporary Chief Constable of Staffordshire.
Thank you very much for that. It was really comprehensive, and I'm sure that members will really appreciate that. If members will just indulge me, I'd just like to express my thanks as a Cabinet member in East Staffordshire for the support that we had from the police during the checking of compliance during the pandemic. Outstanding. And,
thank you.
That represented true team working, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
If I may just ask you a question, how will you ensure visibility of police operationally to provide assurance to the public, and how is your performance measured, and what will success look like, let's say, in 12 months' time?
Okay, there's quite a bit in your question there, and I think it's very easy to see visibility just purely around numbers and what's happening on the streets. I like to think of it very much in the terms of the presence that we have within our communities, which of course can be multifaceted. I also think it's really important to have to be really accessible to the public, to think about how they can contact us, how they can pass on information to us, and what they see in their communities, which of course may be a physical presence, but it may also be online, it may be written literature, it's also about the confidence that they have with what they see, experience, what they know. I think it's fair to say some of the work that we're doing at the moment is looking again at how we engage with our communities, to understand that level of visibility and that level of presence, and how effective that engagement is. And again, you know, I hark back to when I was very closely involved with neighbourhood policing in my previous force. That to me is the bedrock of how we build our policing service. Everything happens in a location, and our policing service has to extend beyond that visible presence through neighbourhood policing into the confidence that communities have in what is going on, which is perhaps not quite as visible. So our investigators, our specialists in terms of digital forensics, for example, who contribute to that overall performance, if you like, in terms of the outcomes we achieve, and that feeling of safety in a community. I think another key bit is how we do work with partners, because the feelings of safety in a community, feelings of reassurance, cannot just be about the police. It's actually around how everybody works together who's got a responsibility to make people feel safe in their community. And also how we use our communications and media teams to make sure the good, positive messages are happening alongside where we need to have support and help. And, you know, I really would like to see that people are confident to come forward to either report or indeed pass on information. But I would like to see that they know what's happening in their neighbourhood, and they're really clear on the good things that are happening that should reassure them, as well as when we're asking for information about a crime or whatever that has happened. I really think in terms of what success looks like, it is that people feel safer in their communities. I think that one way of looking at that is in terms of surveys and understanding what our service has done for them or how it's made them feel. We talk a lot about confidence. Confidence can be affected by many different things, some of which are not within my gift or my office's gift. But satisfaction with the service that we deliver is absolutely down to us and how we interact, how we respond, how we investigate, how well we keep people informed. So I take a very close look at satisfaction levels alongside the things that I think the public would like to see, which is about outcomes and also crime levels. And I think it's about having that dialogue with communities and making that information available to them.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me open it up to colleagues now. Colleagues, are there any other questions? Brian Jones.
Welcome, Deputy Chief Constable, and what a fantastic resume from a brilliant career, and you articulated it so well, so congratulations for that. I'm Brian Jones, the Deputy Leader at Cannock Chase District Council. I did have two questions. You answered them both in your resume. One was, what's the difference between a temporary Chief Constable and a substantive one? And you gave a full answer there where you weren't going to make wholesale changes. And I was also going to ask you what your priorities were, but you've already articulated those. So can I ask you a different question? And notwithstanding that you don't intend to change too much, if I can paraphrase it that way, what do you see perhaps as the biggest weakness within Staffordshire Police at the moment? What you would like to address?
Okay, so I think what my intention is really is that we, you know, whilst I don't think it's within my gift at the moment to make sweeping changes, I do think very importantly we shouldn't stand still, and we should make sure that we are doing the work now that a permanent chief in line with a new police and crime plan, we're able to make some informed decisions in the future around anything that we may choose to change. One of the things we are looking at is our resourcing and where we have our officers and staff and what they're doing, and could we make that more effective moving forward. I think you say weakness. I wouldn't say it's a weakness. What I'd say, it's an area that I think is ripe for some improvement. So some work to really understand the impact of the new demands that are going to be placed on us in this new normality, for want of a better phrase, and to really also understand some of the challenges coming that we have around our ability to bring people to justice, and some of the outcomes work that we're engaged in, and also some of the partnership work that we would like to do in order that we can keep crime low and reduce those crimes that cause the greatest harm. And I think by looking at that, what we're trying to do is just review where we are in terms of where we've got officers and staff. What are they doing? Could we do it differently, which may be more effective? I think that the thing at the moment I would suggest is that I truly believe in the operating model we have, but I do think it's timely that we review that in light of some of the new changes that are coming down the line. And the only other thing I would say, which is a risk perhaps, is how I describe it, is we've been through a lot in the last 15, 18 months, and I think people on a personal level, and I'm talking about the staff here now, on the personal level and a professional level, have gone through a huge challenge, and I think they've done a fantastic job, and I'm very grateful for the feedback earlier. But I think it's taken its toll, and we're very committed over the next few months around supporting our officers and staff to you know, a healthy workforce, a well workforce delivers better. And I think we recognise that there's a lot of work to be done to support our officers and staff going forward.
Any more? Yes, thank you.
Hi, congratulations on your role. I'm Leslie Adams, I represent the City of Stoke-on-Trent. You've talked a lot about neighbourhood policing being at your heart, and very simple question really from me. How do you view the value of your local ward councils with that local knowledge that you've stressed it so strongly with working alongside your local inspectors? Do you see that as a great value? I find that often I get residents that will report stuff into me that won't necessarily report it into the police. And if I'm bluntly honest, I haven't always found that information been greatly valued when I've passed it forward. How are you going to address those issues of working more closely with those people on the ground?
Okay, I mean, I think there's a huge value for the role of ward councillors and people who hold any sort of standing within a community, whether that is a formal appointment or whether indeed it is a informal community leader. And I think at its heart, what we should be doing is everybody should come together, because I would hope everybody would want to achieve the same outcome. One of the things that I'm very keen to do over the next couple of months is just reconnect the organisation back to our vision, which we did launch last September. I don't think it's perhaps landed as strongly as perhaps it should have done, probably because of distractions with the COVID policing. But, you know, at its heart, creating a safer Staffordshire, delivering a safer Staffordshire is about working together so that we have safety and well-being in all of our communities. And I would suggest ward councillors are absolutely key to that, alongside other community leaders. I would hope that there is a very good relationship with between yourselves and also the local policing teams, sergeants, and also the Chief Inspector. One of the things I'm keen to do, again, now that we're coming out of COVID, one of the things I'm really looking forward to is getting out. And I'm intending to see and meet all the local policing commanders over the next couple of months to really check out the strength of those relationships. So again, I would say to anybody, if people have got feedback or concerns around the service that we're delivering, any aspect, I'd be really pleased to hear that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Thank you.
Tony Holmes, Fulford Parish Council. We used to have PCSOs and officers attend the parish council meetings. I'm also the vice president of the association, Parish Council Association, and we are getting the same response from most of the parish councils. They don't come anymore.
Right.
We don't expect them to turn up at every meeting, but if they just spared us, I don't know, 20 minutes just to pop in on the meeting night, it would be appreciated, because we get the feedback from the general public, as you say, the local communities, and we feed it in, but we get no response. We feel when we feed it to an officer, then we do get some response, because he then replies back on paper or an email or something like that to give us a response. Would you look forward to letting them do that again, please? Because we know that was removed. Don't go there.
Okay, I will have to look into why that was, if that was the direction that was given. I mean, clearly we've had some issues around attendance at meetings with COVID, etc., but I think there's a strong online presence for the meetings. You know, a really important part of what we do is around how we engage, and engagement with a purpose. You know, that might sound a little trite, but it needs to have a purpose. And I would be surprised as to why we wouldn't attend something like a parish council meeting. I think, as you say, perhaps not every meeting, but providing you've got dialogue and you know who your local team is or your local PCSO, then I would have thought that that dialogue can continue with some attendance at meetings, or just giving you the reports, or, you know, what I would want you to have is an ability to contact the officers or the PCSOs, whether that's through a formal meeting structure or indeed at any time. So I'll take that back and just have a look at what we're doing, but it is absolutely part of what I would like to see all our neighbourhoods do, which is about engaging with a purpose.
Mr. Sweet.
I'm a huge privilege to be deputy leader in Newcastle, and obviously it's a jewel in Staffordshire's crown, which I think we all know. But the police station in Newcastle is in the civic offices, as again I'm sure you know. And the relationship with Chief Inspector Duffy, who's our local commander, you just walk downstairs and talk to him. And it's as good as that. I've got his number on my phone, and it works really, really well, that cooperation. It's all about talking and sitting down and having the dialogue with different agencies, which when they're the floor down in the same building makes life a lot easier. What's the situation with yourself in the fire service? Do you have that same sort of communication lines with the fire service? So I believe we've got a lot to offer, and you've got a lot to offer the fire service.
Yes, we meet. I mean, we meet regularly with the fire service, and operationally, there is a relationship between those that are delivering our services. We obviously have two shared facilities at Tamworth and Hanley, which have gone down very well, I think, for both services. And again, you know, at the risk of repeating myself, it is about having those relationships. It is about working together. And I think there is a lot of work that goes on at an operational level. And, you know, executive-wise, we do meet with the fire service. We have structures and governance through the Commissioner's office as well, that we talk about our collaboration opportunities and the services that we deliver jointly.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? I just want to make one observation at the end, if I may. I was very interested when you talked about the stress and the pressure on officers as a result of the pandemic and 18 months worth of total disruption. When you think county lines, domestic violence, mental health incidents and related issues, the police are probably drawn into those scenarios at regular intervals. And it occurred to me, as a layman perhaps, would it be right to say that you could be looking at something like a PTSD scenario for the impact on the staff? They've never seen such an intensity of these sorts of incidents, or are the staff really across all this and they're able to cope? I'm just concerned. I think my question is around having concern for the welfare of the staff, nothing to do with us, of course, but building on the very comprehensive account that you gave us and how much value you put on that.
Well, I mean, I think the starting point, as I said, is, you know, and I have to pay tribute to my staff for the work that they do day in, day out. You know, they're out there now. You know, the beauty of policing is its, you know, unpredictability at times, but the downside is, you know, we are there for people at the worst times of their lives, and we deal with some dreadful things. And I think there is recognition, though, that whilst particular incidents on their own are very impactive and can have a really significant impact on the officers and staff who deal or attend or are involved in some way. There is recognition now that there can be a build-up of continual pressures that officers and staff face. And that's why having good occupational health services and support for officers is really important. And also to encourage a culture where it is okay to say you're not okay. And we have tremendous support from groups like Oscar Kilo who do just that. And also the Police Federation and the staff associations and the support that's offered, because I think there is now a recognition that some of this can build up over time, and we need to be alive to that.
Right, thank you for that, that's really helpful. Right, I don't think there are any more questions now, so we've perhaps concluded this section. What we'd like to do is adjourn to the back room to deliberate, so if you'd bear with us, and we'll be back as soon as we possibly can. Thank you very much for your contribution, and Mrs. Fisher's as well. Thank you. Okay. Are we all back? Yes. Well, thank you very much for participating this afternoon. We've found it very helpful. And I can tell you that both appointments are unanimously confirmed. And we wish you the very best of luck moving forward. And for the Commissioner, you'll receive a letter tomorrow detailing our response regarding Mrs. Fisher. Thank you for your attendance and all the very best for the future.